Hi, we'd like to welcome you to another in a series of webinars designed for airports and the aviation community. I'm Terry Bills, and I'm the Transportation Industry Manager here at Esri. And today I'm joined by David James and Michael Beavers, both from our airport sales team. I guess I should mention at the beginning, if we all sound a little different today, we're actually the three of us are still suffering the effects of COVID, which seems to have ransacked the country at the moment. So we're all a little bit scratchier, a little bit more nasal. We apologize for that up front. So today's webinar is focused on how ArcGIS can provide a framework that integrates planning and design processes associated with capital improvement projects and can help airport professionals better contextualize their data and information and better track their projects from planning through project delivery. So before we begin, I'd like to point out that we are recording this webinar, and while everyone will be on mute, there will be time for question and answers at the end of the presentation. You can type your questions into the question box, and we'll try to answer as many as time allows at the end. Additionally, this webinar will be posted online in roughly 3 or 4 days, and the slides will also be made available as well. So to begin, let me say that I guess Infrastructure Week has finally arrived. We will actually be making the largest investments in our infrastructure in decades, if not in the nation's history. And while the bulk of that investment will go to roads and highways, and bridges and broadband, a significant portion will also go to airports and aviation. So there are really 3 different pots that encompasses about $25 billion over 5 years, both for airports and for aviation. So 2 pots totaling about $20 billion will be budgeted for airport capital improvement grants, and the $5 billion for FAA related facilities. So under the airport infrastructure grants, $15 billion over 5 years, translating to roughly $3 billion annually. Of that $3 billion, roughly just under $2.5 billion is actually allocated for primary airports, $500 million for general aviation, and non-primary airports. In addition, another $5 billion, or roughly $1 billion annually, will be competitive new airport terminal competitive grant programs. So, and 55% of those grants will go to large hub, 20% for small hub, and 15% for medium hubs. So it's great that we're going to be investing in our infrastructure, but in the U.S., unfortunately, we have some of the most expensive infrastructure in the world. To give you a little bit of perspective, between 1947 and 2010, agriculture achieved a cumulative real growth in productivity of over 1,500%. Manufacturing had productivity growth of over 760%. Unfortunately, construction only managed a 6% productivity gain during that same period. And as a matter of fact, U.S. construction sector productivity is actually lower today than it was in 1968, and it's even fallen within the past decade as well. So the real challenge, I think, for airport professionals is how do we make the most strategic decisions? Strategic in what and where to build, strategic in how we plan and design those projects, and strategic in how we deliver those projects, and strategic in how we manage the data and the information that's used through the whole project life cycle. So ultimately, how are we to ensure we're building the right project at the right cost, at the right time to deliver value, not only for our stakeholders, but ultimately for our customers. So we're going to have a quick poll at the moment, and we'll go ahead and run through a couple of questions. We'll get these answers, and then we'll move into the substance of the webinar. Okay, we're going to go to the next question. Okay, and the final question. All right, we'll go ahead and close that off, and I'll turn it over to David James. And David, if you want to take it away, please.
Okay, thank you, Terry, and Happy New Year to everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, the first of 2022. And in today's webinar, we wanted to introduce you to the tools that Esri has that can be used to support your capital investment programs. We think these tools, combined with other tools from vendors such as Autodesk, can transform the way that airports manage these critical programs. Next slide, please, Terry. As you may be aware, Esri and Autodesk have been collaborating very closely for a number of years now. We're trying to understand how our technologies can be aligned to improve GIS and BIM workflows for our shared customers. We've really focused on transforming the capital project lifecycle in terms of both reality capturing and sharing, designing the real world in 3D, creating a geographically informed design, optimizing how infrastructure operates through the use of things like IoT, and then information is central, and sharing that information and data across all the stakeholders that are involved in these projects. Our focus always started with the understanding that the complete workflow of how data moves between planning, designing, building, and operating buildings and infrastructure. The key has been to figure out how we can more easily integrate BIM and GIS data to improve this process. We also wanted to bring context to the design and construction workflows that lead to construction and renovation of facilities and infrastructure. Improving that data integration workflow will bring immediate value to both GIS and BIM users. We know we can achieve more than just data integration, and today we will show you the tools that have resulted from this work with Autodesk. Okay, next slide, please, Terry. ArcGIS GeoBIM delivers an innovative, easy-to-use web-based experience for teams to explore and collaborate on building information models, BIM, and projects and issues. Using data from multiple systems in a geospatial context, architecture, engineering, and construction teams can easily work with linked data from multiple systems in configurable web apps that simplify the communication and collaboration with teams and stakeholders. This is a relatively new product. It's been out probably several weeks now. We're going to show you how you can leverage this as part of your capital programs processes. Okay, next slide, please, Mike. Terry, sorry. We're also going to show you some Esri's core technology being used to produce this capability we refer to as the project delivery dashboard. And it will enable organizations to easily share a wide range of capital project related data with interested stakeholders and decision makers, everything from complex BIM through to Primavera data to imagery captured over time using drones to show the progression of construction in what we call reality capture. Okay, Terry, next one. And finally, we're going to show you a product called ArcGIS Urban, which enables planners and design professionals to collaborate across teams with web-based 3D applications that support scenario planning and impact assessment. ArcGIS Urban enables the digital transformation of a city or a region through a planning process to encourage collaboration with community stakeholders and will help all groups work towards a more sustainable future. We think Urban really has a lot of benefits that could be explored by airports as part of your master planning process. So I think you'll enjoy this. Okay, Terry, I think we move on to the demos now.
All right, everybody. Let me know when you see my screen.
Yeah, we can see it, Mike.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the time, everybody. I'm going to start by saying this, that as you begin to deploy more GIS, really now it's presumed that you're going to be able to make that information available to your constituents and users, and then those that contribute and consume that information, make that available to them through the web and through very focused, simple to use apps that they can access on mobile devices. And that's the intent behind all of these tools, whether you're curating or maintaining that data or just consuming it as a user. The web is the medium, that's the interface. So what I've done is made a warehouse for most of those applications, and for the demo today, I stood up this website where I have access to many of those tools securely. So I've signed into this website, and your airport would have a similar look and feel to whatever branding you already have with this application, with this hub site. And you could embed whatever tools and apps you want. In fact, the first thing I did was I embedded the link to today's webinar here, where you could click it and then sign up for the webinar. Other things that are relevant to your airport would be easily accessible through an app like this. If you're wanting information about a specific airport within your jurisdiction, you'd simply use an app like this, zoom into that focused area, and then get more details about it. It's embedded. And then based on my credentials, I'd have access to any of these apps simply by clicking on this icon, and it would take me to the information I needed, whether I'm curating that data or just consuming it. So Hub is that product, and I'm going to be covering some relatively new tools. So I wanted to give you, at the end of the webinar, links to our product pages, and I'm going to go through those first before I actually dive into the technology. So hopefully give you a little bit more clarity and remind you about what you're going to be seeing. We've got GIS and BIM, and that was really where David led off, was the idea now that the enterprise systems that we offer and those through Autodesk and others are open to one another. So if you were to hit this link, you could see more about how planners and designers are actually leveraging the tools that are available through Esri that allow you to consume and contribute using Esri and other products like the Autodesk products. So that's this link. ArcGIS Pro is a curator's tool, and it's been out for several years now, but it's the desktop tool that allows you to curate data, do analysis, and then share that information to the web so that others can consume it. So if you or anybody within your organization has that role, then Pro is that desktop tool that they're going to be using in order to curate and share that information and do complex analysis. I'll show you a little bit more about Pro by opening that in just a minute. And if anyone's using CAD products, which most of your airports are, originally, the expectation was that they had to start adopting GIS and learning those tools, but really that's not true anymore. With the Autodesk and the Esri product line being open to one another, now we can consume information between the two enterprise systems. And using this free plugin, I'll be able to make edits as a CAD technician to GIS data and then share that directly back to the web. So it's a much more seamless way to interact with your CAD data as a CAD technician. GeoBIM, like David mentioned, is a viewer, and it's a beautiful way for you to have web-based access to some very complex data models that used to require expensive software and a lot of training. And now with this web viewer, much of that is available to you through this internet website. I'll show you more about that in a minute. Likewise, Indoors is becoming widely adopted at airports and other types of campuses with multiple facilities that need to be managed throughout their life cycle. There's a project delivery dashboard that I'll show you in a moment, and what that does is gives you real-time access to the status of all the projects across your airport. And I'll show you that demo here as well. And then we'll talk about ArcGIS Urban. And if you're a planner, or if you're anyone who designs or is looking at the comprehensive life cycle of an airport as it relates to a larger urban area, then this tool is extremely valuable, and I'll show you a live demo of that as well. All right, so let's start out by looking at ArcGIS Pro. And the role that I'm going to be playing is that of a data curator at the airport. And I receive information and data from maybe a third-party vendor or a contractor during the construction of, say, this new terminal. And they deliver that product to me, that Revit data to me, and I can take that Revit model, I can bring it directly into ArcGIS Pro and view it with all the same types of details that I could originally have seen it in Revit. But I don't need that training or that expensive software in order to now consume that Revit model and see it in its geographic context. Included in that, I could bring in all the assets and infrastructure that I already have inside my GIS to see how it ties in to this Revit model. And this is a view capability. We'll zoom in a little bit more, and then I can see all the details in Pro that are available through the Revit model that I don't necessarily need the Autodesk product line in order to have access to. And simply by clicking on any of these assets, I'll see the details about it. And that's true not just on the exterior of the building, but as we migrate our way to the interior parts of your facilities, including the terminal, then you'll see with Pro, I've got the same level of access to that, so I can start to do interrogations and analysis on some of the features that exist in here in the Revit model that I originally only had access to that through CAD. Likewise, I've got 3 panels that I can view here, and the first is of this parking facility at the airport. And this is the raw CAD data that was delivered to me in a CAD format. Of course, typically you'll see that a lot of the CAD data isn't geo-referenced, but once you do have a coordinate system assigned to it, then I can bring that CAD data directly into my GIS viewer and start to interact with it as well. And I could even convert and then start consuming that CAD data inside a viewer, which now I've created a geodatabase of that very same data, and I have it so I could start managing that facility, those parking levels, inside GIS. Now, this data in the center panel is actually in a geodatabase that I have stored locally. I could then take these Pro tools and then publish that data so that it sits on a portal on a web page, so that now I could start standing up some real focused applications to help me manage that facility through the web and then consume it and see it with mobile devices. So the Pro product actually gives me the ability to consume and do analysis and then share that information in multiple formats with my users. All right. Now I'd like to go through a little bit of a workflow where we're going to look at a project in Autodesk. And this is an interior space at the Atlanta Hartsfield International Airport. And I'm a CAD tech, and I'm actually going to be making some changes to a CAD drawing so that they're reflected in an indoor model. Now, we're not asking that CAD tech to do anything different than the work they're already doing. They just open Autodesk. And with this extension, the ArcGIS for AutoCAD extension, I now have a ribbon which gives me a connection to my GIS. And I can then add data that's in my portal, in my online organization, simply by clicking here. And I sign into the organization, and then I have access to a large variety of data, including imagery, and then any other hosted services that I'm already able to see and consume. And I'll turn on the contents panel and maybe just add in the imagery. And that historically wasn't that easy to do because I'd have to get a georeferenced image layer that I had to pay for and then include it in my Autodesk product in CAD. But now that's not necessarily true. This comes with your subscription, so information like that's already available. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to make an edit. So when I work with my CAD data, one of the most important things is to maintain a current and relevant data model that others can start to draw information from. And because in interior spaces, lease spaces and activity inside the terminal change regularly. So now, for example, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add in an area where a kiosk is going to be included. And that kiosk can be one that I can have the ArcGIS Indoors app installed on. And that kiosk is going to go here. I can either draw it in using Kogo, bring it in as an as-built drawing, or I could draw it in by heads-up digitizing like I've done here. And once I'm done with the actual drawing of that, this is the layer in the CAD drawing. I'm going to go back to GIS and make some simple attribution of this feature. So I select it, and then pop-up information about that unit shows up. So it's a kiosk, and I can just edit right now. And then likewise, put other information that's relevant, maybe even a link to a picture about that specific unit that's being leased. And then I could simply synchronize that data by clicking the Synchronize All button. And once I do synchronize that data, what it's going to do is it's going to upload those changes into my organization. You can see that I've added one unit. And when I synchronize that data, then it's going to show up in my web map so that others who have that application can see it in real time. So this is that same interior space in ArcGIS Indoors. And you can see that original kiosk doesn't exist. But since I've now synced it, as I zoom in, what you'll notice will be that that kiosk space shows up. And it also includes the pop-up information about that kiosk. So it's a kiosk, it's at the terminal, and I could even include a picture of that kiosk. So the beauty of these tools are that they're web-based, they connect to your curation tools, and that they don't require me as a CAD tech to do anything different than I'm already doing in order to manage those. All right, let's talk a little bit more about how the data that a curator, maybe it's a third-party vendor who created a BIM model during the life cycle of the building at an airport, how we could see those changes as they evolve, as the building's being built. And that actually happened here at the Houston George Bush Intercontinental Airport, where United Airlines paid to build this terminal, and throughout the construction project, the technicians were publishing this 3D web scene of the Revit data to a web browser so that anybody who's interested in seeing the development of the building throughout its life cycle could simply use this viewer and then see the building as it is being built and evolves. And again, it's web-based, it's secure, and just simply by clicking on any of the assets or the features in this web scene, I could get the very same level of detail that I could originally have gotten from my Revit model. And that's true not just on the exterior of that building, but throughout the interior. And as this terminal received its certificate of occupancy and it's being used now, the airport is still using these tools to manage the facility. For example, maintenance, even things as small as a wall socket where someone reported through a web app that that electrical fixture is no longer functioning, then if I were to manage that facility and be responsible for maintenance, I could navigate to this specific feature, see a design drawing of it, and then conduct some maintenance so I could quickly return it to service. Likewise, for HVAC, the airport is using indoors and their Revit data inside this viewer to manage their HVAC systems, whereas an air handling unit may be needed to have some maintenance done, they have to shut it down. These specific vents would be inoperative unless they were to transfer the load to another unit. So being able to access that information directly through the web makes this real simple. I'm going to have to refresh this view. So let's get on now to the next in my topic, and that's going to be how you can consume and see BIM data directly inside a viewer. And that's using this GeoBIM product line. As this scene loads, what you're going to notice that it is really just a web viewer. It's just a 2 and a 3D viewer. And I've curated this data so that a consumer could just see individual things. Maybe for planning purposes at the airport, I could look at a zoning overlay and I could see those different zoning units around the airport and click on a specific parcel and see more details about it. We'll zoom through now and look at other information, including a 3D view. And that 3D view in this web scene includes details about the specific buildings that are either built or being planned for development, and existing infrastructure, other facilities, roadways, runways, anything that you've got in a database can be included in a 3D scene like this. And again, it's interactive. And like all other functionalities, simply clicking on a specific feature gives me details about it. We'll go to this bookmark and we'll talk about a few more things that are included with GeoBIM. For example, detailed landscaping, because at the airport, of course, that's a really critical part of the function of the airport, is just how it looks and feels, and trying to integrate the natural landscape is critical. Being able to see trees and their growth and maybe how they are impacting protected airspace can also be rendered inside GeoBIM. As I zoom through these bookmarks, we're going to start drilling down into specific facilities here. And let's have a look at maybe the infrastructure that exists for new construction. And this is a 3D viewer which allows me to see all my above ground and then below ground facilities as well. So I could tilt this and then see below ground and then see all the assets that are currently mapped, or maybe those that are planned for development as well. Even light poles, everything that's associated with the building can be accessed here directly through this web viewer. Let's start to look at this one new facility that's being built with GeoBIM. As I click on it, then you'll see it renders, and what's rendering is these block diagrams of those areas that have already been built, and then the Revit model where this new facility is going to be constructed. And if I wanted more information, including a link to the actual Revit model, all I do is click on that building and I can see the exterior shell and the architecture and some more details about it. And then with this link, I could then link using the GeoBIM to Forge, which is an Autodesk product, which is a viewer that allows me then to see details and do cross sections of that building and see those things side by side with the facility where it exists. Now, as I zoom in and as you'll see this BIM model start to render, I don't have any additional software requirements. I can see this through Forge and I can start doing things like seeing cross sections, fly-throughs, explode that building so I can see details about it. All of those things available through the web. I really think GeoBIM is a very valuable tool. I find it real easy to use, and it makes the whole process of understanding the architecture, the structures, the infrastructure of proposed buildings and how they fit into surrounding spaces much more understandable. I'm going to take you now to another product, and again, I apologize, we're doing a kind of a quick world tour of a lot of these applications. I'm going to talk to you for just a moment about this project delivery tool. And in effect, what this dashboard in this tool allows you to do would be able to integrate information and statistics and metrics about the status of projects that are ongoing around the airport into one dashboard. You've already seen and maybe interacted with dashboards at your airport as well. So it's no surprise that you can do the same thing here, where I see that very same model I was looking at with my GeoBIM, and I can start to see details about it. And again, just clicking on information about that gives me quick access to it. Likewise, dashboards that give you the status of inspections that are going on throughout the construction process, we can see those in one web viewer securely. So I've got the location here, pictures and attributes about the status of that building as it's being constructed, metrics that talk about the environmental categories, the temperature ranges of that building as it's operating, the status of inspections. All of these are available and configurable, and that's what's included with this project delivery dashboard. I won't talk too much more, but I do want to remind you that you're able to connect also to Primavera through this dashboard, which also gives you the list of all the tasks that are associated with a project. You can see those things in a pie chart and a diagram, as well as details about those tasks that are listed here in the dashboard itself. So I think this is a very comprehensive way for us to be able to see the status of the project. And now, with the advent and the use of drone technology, we can even integrate through the different phases of construction these detailed point clouds like you see here, and this is where this building is under construction. And we've got this warehouse now of all the data that was collected from the drone, and I can then tab through it and then see the phases of the build out and see very high levels of detail that were collected from the drone imagery in this warehouse. So these tools make access to that information very, very quick and easy. I think I've covered as much as I can about the project delivery demo, and I'm getting close to my time, but I want to finish with Urban. And I find Urban, as having worked in a planning department, a really valuable tool, because before Urban came along, planners really didn't have a comprehensive way to then visualize the status of existing conditions at the airport and how they fit into the surrounding urban areas. And where I think most airports are challenged is to grow themselves and expand their business, because most of the time airports are restricted by encroachment of urbanization and by limits that are already based on existing conditions. So in order to be sustainable and to grow, the airport, along with the urban communities where they reside, can use this tool to plan for scenarios where they could modify the density, the land use, and the zoning in and around the airport, and be able to look at statistics and see how those plans might better improve the functionality and the long-term sustainability of the airport. Again, if you want more information about Urban, you can just Google search Esri and Urban, and this is what you'll get to. It talks a lot here about how, as an airport and cities, are able to use Urban, but I'm going to bounce right into the demo here. I'm going to refresh this view so that I get a fresh version of it. So I'm a planner I don't really know or need to know much about GIS, but with these interactive tools, what I'm able to do is securely log into this website. And once these urban plans draw, what you're going to be able to see is a complex urban model in and around the airport. And this one is loading for the Boston Logan Airport. And once it does load, you'll start to see this urban area built out, and I can start to run through scenarios. I'm going to let that load, and while that's loading, I'll go back here and see if we can talk a little bit more about how urban allows you then to visualize projects. You'll see here that it's a 2 and 3D viewer where I've got existing conditions, and maybe this is a proposed building. We could look at how much that building or those areas might be changed if I were to accommodate different types of zoning or land use, and then measure the impacts of those things through time. Let's see if we've got that model loaded. It's still loading right now. I won't take a lot more of my time because this could actually take a minute. So tell you what, why don't we do this? I'm going to create a video of that urban part of the demo, and I'm going to share that with you along with the links to all these different products that we demoed so far. I've used up almost my entire quota of time, so I probably will stop sharing right now and pass the microphone back to Terry, I believe.
All right, David, do you want to do the recap? Or?
Yeah, definitely, Terry. So again, thanks for attending the webinar. What we've really tried to focus on is how you can use some of Esri's latest tools to support the capital investment programs that you're going to be running at your airports. What we focused on is sort of automated data integration. Really the key is the data that's created as part of the design and planning process. You should be able to reuse it without having to rekey and re-enter it into your GIS or other systems later in the life cycle. And so these latest tools we have allow you to ingest AutoCAD data, whether it's traditional 2D or 3D BIM data. You can ingest it directly into your Esri GIS system. These tools also make it easier for you to share data and allow stakeholders and decision makers to visualize complex data over the web without the need for complicated, costly software tools from other vendors. As I mentioned, we want to maximize the reuse of data, both in both directions, both from GIS into BIM and CAD, and BIM and CAD into GIS. And then through tools like ArcGIS Urban, we believe we can help airports collaborate and work with community partners in their urban area to sort of maximize the opportunities for a sustainable future for the airport and the local community. Okay, Terry.
Okay, with that, we're going to open it up for questions. So please feel free to type your questions into the question box, and we'll start in on the questions. So, there is a question. What is the difference between this platform and various emerging digital twin platforms for infrastructure projects?
I'd be glad to start to address that if you'd like. This is Mike. You know, I think we haven't really used the term digital twin, but it's really synonymous with what we're showing here, in that planners would have access through the web to these digital products that actually reflect conditions that exist in reality throughout the life cycle of your facilities in the area of your responsibility, which means, in effect, you're creating and maintaining this authoritative data set that is a digital twin, meaning it reflects reality now, or it can then, in the case of urban, start to reflect plans that might be part of this future what-if scenario. So the digital twin is a term that represents digital information representing what exists in reality, and as close to that as possible. And with these tools, that I've shown you to curate and manage and share that information, maintaining a digital twin really is not a dream. It's an actual reality. So being able to have a reflection of things that exist in real time, like you'll see, and I'll show you in this urban model, but I think that might answer that question. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, and I think that the questioner also asks, should this tool be considered to be a type of digital twin? And certainly, I guess the way that I would answer that is all of these tools really help you build that digital twin. In my mind, the real power of the digital twin is that you really use it really for managing and operating the airport. So if we think of Schiphol International Airport in Amsterdam, they actually have their digital twin, which they've created in Esri, linked to their SCADA systems and a whole host of sensors really throughout the airport. And that way they're really keeping a real-time view, 360-degree view of all of the status of really the airport facilities, all the airport infrastructure. And really the goal behind that is how do we prevent an asset from failing? Because if you have a failure of an asset at an airport, it can really cause a great deal of disruption. But in fact, if you're monitoring those assets in real time, ahead of time, you can do the preventative maintenance at the right time in the evenings, and you can avoid those types of costly problems. So the digital twin, in my mind, is really how do you use it to manage and to operate, and how do you run different scenarios against that digital twin. And so the digital twin has a particular use within the context of an airport, whether it's terminal side, whether it's air side modeling, but I think these tools are more comprehensive. I think what we've really tried to show you a suite of tools that really helps you do better planning, helps enrich the design process at an airport for capital improvements, and really helps you track and monitor those projects, and how do you organize and really distribute all of that data to anyone and everyone at the airport who really needs it. And I think that's the message I think that we really wanted you to understand, is that this suite of tools really is a fundamental part of really that capital planning and capital construction, capital execution at an airport. Okay, next question. There's what it really had to do with the dashboard, the project tracking, project monitoring dashboard. What kind of an effort goes into creating those dashboards? The person says this looks like it would be really useful for a wide range of airports. They work as a construction project manager, but he wants to know the level of effort required for that.
The beauty of the dashboard as an application is that it's built to be configurable. There's no coding involved. And because it's feeding off of information that's stored in your GIS, and your GIS now you see that can consume information and products from different platforms, mashing all that together into one dashboard really is intended to be intuitive. Now, connecting to these third-party business systems like Primavera also become less effort, because those systems are now open and able to be consumed in the Esri suite, which includes the ArcGIS dashboard. Even metrics that you saw with the pie charts and those diagrams, those things are really data-driven. So when the data that they point to changes, those info cards and those graphics automatically change. So I don't want to undersell the necessity for being able to configure the dashboard, because it does require effort and training, but it doesn't require anything exceptional. I don't have to be a programmer. I don't have to code anything. If I've got other business systems, it's typical now, including live data, that I could consume those and things like that project delivery dashboard. So dashboards connect to even mobile devices where I can update information in the field. And then if I'm connected to the internet, that information pushes back to that dashboard directly. So I really have found a prolific use of dashboards, and how they're being used with project delivery is really not much different than how dashboards are being deployed in other departments, say for safety and security or facilities management or maintenance. So yeah, I think they're relatively intuitive.
So
Yeah, I regard them as sort of relatively low effort, high value tools. So would encourage everybody to take a look at the Esri dashboard technology. And if anyone wants additional information, just reach out to us and we'd be happy to take you on a bit of a deeper dive at any point.
So sorry, I was going to say along that same line, there's another question very similar about linking to Power BI, and maybe you want to just briefly speak to that as well.
Yeah, we've got that plugin that allows you to connect to Power BI, because that business tool has been customarily used to visualize performance metrics, information, financials. So yeah, the Power BI plugin for Esri is built out as well.
Okay. There's another question. Obviously the tools that you've shown are key in terms of really sort of building those 3D models, that digital twin of the airport. Question really is how can these tools be used after handover for operational and for maintenance use?
Yeah, great question. I think throughout the life cycle of your facilities at the airport, these tools are really intended to do that. Consume data as it's updated and managed and then shared. And also the web-based tools give you the ability then to interact with that data and modify it. Like I can show you with this urban scenario, maybe Terry, you could allow me to share my screen again. So for example, I have, let me know when you, okay, good, thank you. So with this urban area around the Boston Logan Airport, we've got a detailed digital twin of all the existing facilities. So I could manage those things and see examples that show me the current zoning, or maybe the development scenarios in there, or maybe some other dashboards or metrics. And then look at these scenarios that might be used beyond what exists now if I wanted to modify, say, the zoning or the land use of this focus area to maybe improve or increase the industrial uses. And if maybe I wanted to focus on bringing more residential into this scenario, I could use these tools to then render and visualize plans for making this a more residential mixed use part of the city. And I could see how those zoning areas might be changed, how different development could exist, and then how those things might impact population, improve the number of households, increase the number of jobs. We can even use it to track energy usage, and now making your airport fit in a more green environment and track the gallons per day and water usage. So the digital twin really reflects not just what is on the ground now, but based on these scenarios, what we're going to be able to forecast and see in the future, and how those things might impact the community that the airport resides in, and how to improve the overall livability of those areas.
So, and I would add, I mean, certainly in terms of the maintenance side, maintenance you can really do in both. You can support your work order and maintenance activities in both 2D and in 3D. And typically you would do that in the GIS, but if you really need to understand a particular asset, you actually have the ability then to go back and really dive into the Revit model if you need, and really sort of dig into the HVAC or any of the other detailed systems. So you have that ability to easily sort of go back and forth, and I think that's really kind of one of the great values of these tools is really that ability to kind of somewhat easily and seamlessly to go back and forth into the Revit model or then into the GIS. So there's a question having to do, this person says, this is all really interesting and powerful, but sort of how much, or what are the tools that you would typically start with really to get going?
Yeah, I'd say first and foremost, all these tools and the applications rely on the existence and the development and the maintenance of good data. So data is really critical. So taking data from its variety of forms and being able to connect to that data and maintaining it is critical. Of course, the applications that are used are important, but really I think the component that we sometimes forget would be the people, and that you have a group of users who might customarily not be using the web or apps whatsoever. So having those people brought into your enterprise system and showing them how easy it is to not just use but contribute to your organization and your enterprise is critical. And then, of course, the infrastructure itself. So being able to have performance systems, computers, and networking to be able to support these systems is critical as well.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe, Terry, an easy way to get started in this area, a good example would be ArcGIS GeoBIM. And so that's a subscription product, and it's $200 per year per user. So for a relatively low cost, you could acquire ArcGIS GeoBIM and start to integrate BIM with GIS, with some of the scenarios that Mike showed you over the web. So, all of this isn't necessarily, a $100,000 investment. You can get started for just a few $100 with GeoBIM.
Okay, and related question. There's a question about ArcGIS for AutoCAD. The question is, do you have to have enterprise, or can it link to a file geodatabase on a network? Is the question.
Well, if that information that you're wanting to connect to is shared to some method like a file geodatabase, which is on a portal behind your firewall, then you can connect to that using the ArcGIS or AutoCAD extension, just like you could if it were on the web. So that data doesn't have to reside wholly in the cloud. It can sit on your own infrastructure.
Okay.
Yeah, and the extension, the plugin is free. Again, it's, so if you're an AutoCAD user within an organization that has Esri GIS and you want to start collaborating with the GIS team, that plugin for AutoCAD is free.
Okay. So the next question, is it possible to have a topographic ground profile that can that also be integrated with the GIS?
Sure. Yeah, the beauty of it is twofold. We offer up a terrain service that's part of your subscription. And also you can bring in your own terrain data, whether you capture that from ground-based surveys, from LiDAR, or some third-party vendor that you have an elevation model from. All of those formats can be consumed and shared inside these web viewers.
Okay. There's another question. This was sort of takes us slightly afield. Have you worked with a specific airport that's found a solution to safe drone flights during daytime airport operations?
Hey, do you want to talk about Airspace Link a little bit and how that partner's helping? Some of the airports that are leveraging that and able to use drones?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Well, we are starting to see now that the integration of drones and having a fleet of drones at the airport really isn't prohibitive. And I think the FAA is starting to relax their restrictions and starting to see the value of using drones in airfield operations, whether you're doing that to use drones to capture information, high resolution imagery, to do asset management or maintenance. We're starting to see airports like Atlanta and others deploying drones while airport operations are ongoing. So the FAA is becoming more accustomed now to doing that. And we've got a partner called Airspace Link, which I would encourage you to consider looking at. Their technology, they have tools that allow airports to track drone activity and be able to plan drone flights. We even have drone tools called Site Scan, which is really a field to finish tool that you can use to then manage your fleet of drones, plan your drone flights, warehouse the drone data that you collect, do analysis of that, and then share the results of that with others, including the FAA. So yeah, to answer your question, as a Part 107 drone operator myself, I always questioned how long it might be before the FAA started to relax those restrictions, and we're starting to see that. And there are airports who are deploying drones every day during airport operations. Of course, separating those two types of aircraft is critical. As a pilot, I definitely appreciate what drones are about, but I want to make sure that my operations and theirs are segregated, and that's what the FAA is focusing on too. But we're seeing more use of those in a real daily operations at airports.
So, and along that line, actually, there's an FAA sponsored initiative right now, really looking at the feasibility of using drones at airports for pavement condition, pavement inspection, and so there's actually another question. And so there are two teams that are currently working on contract with FAA to really evaluate the feasibility of using drone technology to capture detailed pavement information and really being able to do the detailed pavement inspections from a low altitude drone, and those results should be published, I believe, sometime in 2022, and so we're and we actually many of the several of the companies that are doing that are actually partners of Esri, so we've been tracking that effort pretty closely. So.
Clay, I want to remind everyone that I'll send links to you so you can share those with the attendees about the products and any of those demos that are publicly available. I'll send those to you, so look for those in an email.
Okay. All right. Well, unfortunately, we've run out of time. There are a few other questions. We'll go ahead and we'll answer those through emails. We'd like to thank you for your time today. We hope that you found this useful, and we hope that you'll join us for future webinars for in the series for airports and for aviation. So with that, David, Michael, thanks very much, and thank you all for attending. So, all right.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Everybody stay well.